When it comes to Disney and rodents, they hold a very significant importance to how small things can make the biggest changes in the world. We obviously know this fact to be true relating to Mickey Mouse and the legacy he has created with Disney that almost everyone knows about. But in the middle of all of this, 3 years before The Little Mermaid was shown to the public, we had a movie called The Great Mouse Detective, dealing with the world of Sherlock Holmes but in the mousedom side of things, where they had a society similar to our own in a town like London. It's a very good movie that set the stage for the official Disney recovery, being of course directed by the eventual Mermaid directors in Musker and Clements, alongside others like Bernie Mattinson, the animator famous for being the longest serving Disney employee from 1953 during Walt's time to 2023 before the 100th year of the company when he passed, where I think this film had the unique ingredients about it that made something new for Disney while also retaining a very nostalgic familiarity with its golden and silver age. Where of course the best thing that made it all work, like everything I usually talk about, was its villain in Professor Ratigan, who was played by the one and only Vincent Price, who had the greatest career in horror and portraying an endless amount of villains where you could only want someone like him to play that very role. Like, if there was one person you would think want to play a Disney villain, he's actually the first guy you would definitely think of with his amazing legacy, and someone like Ratigan really expresses that truth very well. Like, I think it's very great for Disney to take something like Sherlock Holmes and express it in a form like this, to have a hero have an arch nemesis like James Moriarty and turn him to a rat like some criminals turn out to be. Like, at the start, he already has a background of being a very successful criminal, with the villain who has already won against the hero on several occasions that prolong this fight to the moment we start off in this very film, hence the title of his own song being The World's Greatest Criminal Mind. Yet, the most interesting part about all of them is how they match each other, never really getting the best of each other, whether it be to defeat the villain or stop the hero, a constant cycle that persists until something is actually done about it. His appearance really represents what a rat could be on the messy side of things, being chaotic but also very suave and classy on the surface. I mean, particularly rats and mice themselves don't give off the appearance of class, but in the world of this very film, it makes total sense to his criminal feats and desires, raging at the thought of his mortal enemy and sadistically torturing his own to justify his means. Where the thing he hates the most, other than Basil of Baker Street as that main hero, is actually being called a rat, even though his name literally has that word, and the fact that he actually is one himself, preferring that he be a bigger mouse, where if you didn't know, rats are actually usually bigger than mice as a comparison, so it actually would make sense to that realm, and how the word rat usually applies to dirty rodents who carry diseases and other nasty things that us as humans don't want. I mean, technically, crime is also a disease in our society, so it kind of straightens that point very well too as that villain. But speaking in terms of the events of the movie, we learned that this little mouse named Olivia is trying to find her kidnapped father, Mr. Flaversham, by recruiting Basil of Baker Street to track them down, which leads him to suspect that only the genius of Ratigan can be responsible, knowing events prior to this film, that he kidnapped his father in order to fulfill his greatest plan by making a fake robotic mouse queen to replace the real one to be eaten by his cat. Where yes, this rat-based villain has a cat strangely enough, all for him to rule the entire mousedom for himself when the time is right. Where you see he gets to revel in the torture of his subjects for his own gain, threatening to do something to his own daughter if he can't build what he wants, throwing extravagant parties to boast his bravado that leads into his own villainous song. The world's greatest criminal mind going into his own successes, wanting to be bolder and badder than ever before, which actually turns out to be the contributing reason to why Vincent Price actually called this his favorite role, since he gets to sing such a song, and actually 2 songs in this film, counting when Basil almost meets a certain fate. But the point of this song is to have his minions sympathize with him and go along with whatever grand plans he sets out to do, with his delicious evilness that he extrudes and how he cannot tolerate those beneath him, to call him a rat as we discussed earlier, where the others try to cover for their mates until Felicia eats him as everyone gets to fall into line, to really show the audience how threatening he is as a villain, just being only rat size, but also appearing very bigger than the rest and having a much more giant cat under his belt, that even though circumstances would show us he is just a regular rat that we would brush off on occasion, he still shows himself to be quite big in this realm for a threat that nobody wants to face. Where later on we see him make good on his promise to have his daughter arrive with Fidget's help in order to coerce Mr. Flaversham to work harder on the Mouse Queen, mocking their tearful reunion while he traps Olivia in a bottle. Where judging by his own reactions to their own reunion is where we have to talk about his great facial design if you didn't notice. Like, judging by his appearance quite well, you can see him standing out as this regal figure, you know, with his brushed hair and his charming suit, but how his face is designed with a hint of enraged insanity to it. Just how everything else about his character tries to appear as charming as possible with Vincent's voice and his dress manners, but his face reveals his true intentions and nature of his villainous persona wherever he goes, where everyone is just constantly reminded of that nature. In the film, and of course outside when we watch it, especially when we see the cases where he doesn't get everything that he wanted. But he also shows careful restraint from any major outbursts by his appearance, where just because he appears a certain way that can make him psychotic with Hulk-like rage, doesn't mean he still cannot act like a gentleman in those occasions when he's insulted with Felicia helping out. That even though he almost fears knowing Basil is involved with this plot that could be stopped where he brought Olivia in, he still knows he could use this to his advantage to stop him, knowing their relationship that they constantly talk about in this entire film and the genius that he is to succeed in his past capers. Again, having something like this in a Disney story is great for my opinion because both sides have a unique history to them. They've gone through the pain of trying to deal with each other to no avail, and it makes it much more interesting to see how one story ends. This leads them to get a plan to trap Basil and Dawson, as Fidget leads them to the place that they initially held Olivia so he can gloat that his plan is already set into motion while he ropes Basil into his own demise. That he shocks Basil knowing that he already got what he wanted, delaying him from getting to his place for 15 minutes to the point that he can't feel like he can do anything about it. That once again, Basil gets defeated by his criminal mind where he was too focused on the smaller picture rather than the bigger one, and allowing himself to be trapped by his mortal enemy. And as that enemy, he decides that the perfect machine was to use every killing device to ensure his maximum torture he calls delightfully wicked, as his next song would play, to his own death. And I really like this second song, even somewhat more than the actual villain song first, because it's so upbeat and it's just about him gloating about the times that they face up to the point that he's already won, to a sad pathetic memory that Basil Baker Street couldn't even stop his greatest foe yet. But in his despair and the comments of his colleagues, he actually gets that spark to evade the trap by simply letting it go earlier than expected. That the game still goes on between them because history already demands that no matter how good you could be as a villain or as that hero, because yet again, this is still a Disney story and we expect the good guys to win. We're back at the palace, we see him kinda successfully take over with his minions and actually getting the Toy Queen out to declare Ratigan as the new ruler, all dressed up in his royal clothing, laying down some new laws for his own subjects, like declaring new heavy taxes on parasites like the elderly, infirm, and children. Probably one of the most evil things you've seen a villain ever attempted to do, simply by just using taxes. Now demanding that those who were once free from that system be held under it, all the way to the point that they're probably broke by his own words. Something that really shows that he is a rat in all the ways possible because he stole money from the poor in this very way and now can do it legally as a government official. But luckily, just in time, as we all know, they escaped and actually scared off the cat because they had a dog, and managed to free the queen and Flaversham to prove that she did not say these things, as everyone starts to turn on him as Basil willingly declares him to be a rat indeed. Like finally we see here he loses everything while trying to kidnap Olivia once again to cover his escape, where things now get a little worse for them and more crazy as everyone also starts to declare he is that very rat. Like at this point, because everyone's insulting him constantly by calling him the thing he doesn't want, you see him disregard others in order to preserve himself to whatever state he can get in, like throwing his subject into the Thames so he can actually preserve himself to wherever he can be. So when the blimp crashes into Big Ben, Ratigan's full rage is shown, chasing after Basil and Olivia as he has nothing left to live for, showing the true feral state of villainy that was always on display with his face, even though his mouth never got to show that. So up on the clock tower himself, we see him resort to using brute force and violence to tear up his foe in Basil as much as he can, where nothing could stop him until the clock struck can, causing loud vibrations to shake as he gets dragged down to his own death miles below, while Basil manages to survive with the rest of them intact. A fate well deserved for a small little rat for the many times they faced where it almost did seem like both of them would share that for their infamous history, but again, how it could not be to just have good triumph in the story. That even though he's not the most remembered Disney villain when you think of the major players that are constantly mentioned, he certainly is the most flavorful, bringing in a delicious air of cruel villainy that only rats could provide. That he lives up to the bad image he has because he loves it and expresses exactly what you need when your hero is a famed detective based on the likes of Sherlock Holmes. And because of it, he really is the middle ground between the past and present shapes of Disney villainy itself, considering its bridge between the Golden and Silver Age eras between the Renaissance and Revival ones, even if the latter one is the least remarkable of the bunch. That Ratigan should be well remembered for the true voice of villainy appearing in all shapes and sizes and the touch of criminal delight that this world could only offer. And I'm all done. Goodbye.